Hello everyone, if a video is describing something outside of that population, I'll mention it up front. But for the most part, this is the group I focus on because it reflects my actual clinical experience. Today I want to tackle a topic that's been requested from several different angles by different people, so I've combined a lot of what you all have been asking about into this single video. The subject is how to attract an avoidantly attached person, and along the way we're going to look closely at the difference between approaches that genuinely work and approaches that people assume work but actually backfire. There's a lot of misunderstanding floating around this topic, and I want to clear some of that up as we move through it. Generally speaking, avoidant individuals can be genuinely difficult to attract because they tend to be extremely particular. They often carry a very specific, sometimes rigid list of qualities they're looking for in a partner. Part of the reason behind this specificity is that on some level, they aren't especially eager to connect deeply with people in the first place. So having an exacting list of requirements becomes, whether consciously or not, a way of sabotaging connection before it even has a chance to start. It functions almost like a built-in excuse system, a way of avoiding attraction to someone by framing it as pickiness rather than fear. That said, something people frequently miss, and something I see constantly in my practice, is that a lot of avoidantly attached individuals who do have this specific list aren't doing it purely out of avoidance. The specificity exists because these individuals, generally speaking, take a long time to form real connection with another person. But once they do form that connection, they go all in, they commit fully, and on some level they're aware of that about themselves. Because they know how deeply they invest, once they finally let someone in, they want to be absolutely certain that the person they're investing in is worth it across nearly every dimension of life. This pickiness isn't limited to romantic relationships either. It shows up in nearly every area of an avoidant person's life. They might be extremely selective about the car they buy. They might take forever deciding on a house. They might be unusually particular about the job they accept. I've actually touched on this in a couple of previous videos too. Avoidant individuals tend to weigh factors that other people, particularly anxiously attached individuals, often don't even consider. Take career choices as an example. Anxious or securely attached people will frequently prioritize job security, things like a strong pension, solid retirement benefits, comprehensive health insurance. For an avoidant person, none of that tends to rank as the top priority. What matters most to them is autonomy. Can they do their job without being micromanaged? Can they operate according to their own judgment and direction? Can they advance based on merit and results rather than needing to network or maintain close relationships with a boss? It's much more about having control over their own input and output. Because of this, you'll often see avoidant individuals gravitate toward contract work, construction, finance, sales, since those fields are frequently numbers-driven and results-based, or running their own business entirely. Fields like software engineering also come up often, since they can allow for minimal day-to-day social contact. So, as you can see, avoidant individuals approach nearly every major decision differently than most people, and romantic partners are no exception to that pattern. So, what's the first step in attracting an avoidant partner, or re-attracting one if you're already in a relationship where the initial spark has faded a bit, which is a completely normal part of long-term relationships? The very first thing is confidence, without tipping over into arrogance. This distinction matters enormously. Confidence genuinely attracts people, avoidant or otherwise, but the moment it shifts into arrogance, it becomes a repellent rather than a draw. Avoidant individuals tend to strongly dislike arrogance in others, and ironically, they can sometimes come across as arrogant themselves without meaning to. That's not an excuse for the behavior, but understanding the root of it helps. When an avoidant person appears confident to the point of seeming arrogant, it's rarely because they genuinely believe they're superior to others. More often, it's a defensive mechanism. Their dislike of arrogance in a partner usually stems from the fact that they don't want to be around someone who acts superior to other people, because deep down, they're afraid that if you start feeling that you're better than them, you'll eventually leave, and being left is one of their core wounds. Let me give you a concrete example to illustrate the difference between confidence and arrogance. Imagine saying something like, "I've been working out more lately and I can actually see a difference. I'm proud of the progress I'm making." Notice how that framing centers on effort and personal growth, on tracking your own progress. Avoidant individuals respond really well to language framed around progress and productivity because that's exactly how they tend to talk to themselves internally. That statement, putting in effort, noticing a visible difference, feeling proud, reads as genuine confidence. Compare that to something like, "I've been working out and honestly, I know I look amazing. Everyone's always looking at me." That version can easily register as arrogance to an avoidant partner. It signals to them that you're preoccupied with how others perceive you, which raises red flags in their mind. They might start wondering whether you're seeking external validation or attention from other people, whether that's something they now need to worry about. They might also start questioning whether you're someone who struggles to accept differing opinions or criticism, whether your self-image is so rigid that outside feedback simply bounces off. None of these assumptions may actually be accurate, but this is how an avoidant mind tends to process that kind of statement. So point 1, especially relevant if you're in a long-term relationship where attraction has cooled, is that confidence without arrogance is essential. The second point is self-regulation, paired with the ability to still express vulnerability. Here's an example. Imagine saying, "I had a rough day at work today. I was wondering if you'd have a few minutes after work to talk it through with me. Just 5 minutes of venting would help. I always feel better after talking to you because you're such a good listener." Notice what this communicates. You're being clear that you want conversation and connection, not necessarily a solution to be handed to you. You're also reinforcing that you value them specifically as a good listener, which feels good to hear. You're demonstrating that you can regulate your own emotions, that you only need a brief moment of connection, 5 minutes, not an extended crisis intervention, and that you're actively processing things on your own end while still wanting to stay connected. Now compare that to something like, "I really need your help right now. My boss just yelled at me and I'm completely spiraling. Please pick up the phone. I'm terrified I'm going to get fired." That emotional reaction is completely valid and understandable. But if this becomes a repeated pattern within the relationship, showing consistent difficulty with self-regulation, an avoidant partner may start to feel less drawn to you over time. It can create a sense that your core values or coping styles don't align, and shared values and similar approaches to life matter enormously when it comes to sustained attraction for avoidant individuals. The third point is independence, and this is one that trips a lot of people up because there's a common misconception that being independent means mimicking the exact way an avoidant person practices independence. That's simply not accurate. I'm not suggesting you become independent to a maladaptive degree. What we're aiming for is independence that still leaves room for teaching your partner how to build healthy interdependence with you. Here's an example involving plans with friends. Going out with your friends is a genuinely healthy sign of independence, but we want to frame it in a way that bridges independence and connection rather than choosing one over the other, aiming for real interdependence. You might say something like, "I'm heading out with my friends tonight. I'll have my phone on me, though my replies might be a little delayed. Either way, I'll let you know once I'm home." Notice what's built into that statement. You're managing expectations up front by noting your responses may be delayed, and you're committing to checking in once you're safely home, regardless of how the night goes. You're maintaining your independence by spending time with your friends while still keeping the connection alive. Avoidant individuals tend to respond really positively to this kind of communication for a few reasons. You're clearly going out and living your own life, but you're still building in a sense of security for your partner. I've mentioned before that avoidant individuals place a lot of value on consistency and on knowing that you're not playing manipulative games with them. Part of why this particular phrasing avoids feeling like a game is that you're being upfront. My responses will be a bit delayed, isn't playing hard to get, it's simply honest. I'll let you know when I'm home reflects genuine confidence, confidence in your partner as someone reliable, and confidence in yourself. This stands in stark contrast to intentionally cultivating a mysterious, elusive, I don't need anyone persona. Avoidant individuals are usually remarkably good at seeing straight through that kind of performance. They can sense when someone is pretending to be detached and unbothered, and it doesn't inspire them to stick around because at its core, it feels like a manipulation tactic rather than authenticity. What they actually want is to get to know the real you underneath any performance. By saying something like, my responses may be delayed, I'm busy, but I still care, you're showing genuine care while modeling the exact behavior you'd like to see reflected back at you. You're not stating it outright, but avoidant individuals, especially once they feel safe and close with someone, tend to naturally mirror their partner's behavior patterns. So as you model healthy communication, they're likely to start picking it up too, provided they feel secure with you. Now, let's look at a version of independence that tends not to land as well. Imagine saying, my friends want to hang out today, but I feel like we barely see each other anymore. Do you have any plans tonight? I'd really like to spend time with you. This leans much more toward dependence than independence. Used occasionally, especially after a genuine stretch of not seeing each other, this can actually come across as sweet and thoughtful. But if this becomes a consistent pattern every single time your friends want to include you in plans, your avoidant partner may start to feel burdened, as though it's now their job to keep you socially entertained or fulfilled. They might feel pressured into socializing even when they need solitude or space, and they might start to feel like your friendships are being used not necessarily maliciously, but functionally as leverage to guarantee time with them. It's worth paying attention to whether this is something you do occasionally, which is completely normal and human, or whether it's become a consistent pattern, because the latter can shift how independent you appear to your partner. And this entire conversation is about what genuinely attracts an avoidant partner. On the flip side, there's an opposite extreme too. Saying something like, my friends want to hang out tonight, my phone's going on do not disturb, don't even bother texting me, swings too far in the other direction. That doesn't build connection either, because it signals that you're not particularly invested in staying connected to them. The healthiest approach lives in the middle. Total detachment isn't the goal, and neither is excessive dependence. Interdependence, that balanced middle ground, tends to serve relationships best, though leaning slightly more independent can also be beneficial. Point number 4 is avoiding comparisons. Avoidant individuals strongly dislike being compared to other people or other relationships, and when you accept them fully as they are, without measuring them against some external standard, you become significantly more attractive to them. Here's an example. Say you're watching a movie and the couple on screen takes a romantic getaway together. You might say something like, I was watching this movie earlier and the couple went on this beautiful trip together. I was wondering if you'd ever be open to something similar with me someday. If it's not something you're ready for, that's completely fine. I understand, and I won't take it personally. Adding that closing reassurance doesn't mean the idea is off the table forever. It simply acknowledges that avoidant individuals often need more time to open up to bigger commitments. That kind of disclaimer communicates that you're not trying to pressure or reshape them, just gently expressing a hope. Compare that to a very different reaction some people have in that same moment, watching a romantic scene and feeling that pang of longing. Some people respond with something like, you never take me anywhere. Why can't I be with someone who actually prioritizes this stuff? I can't be with someone who never thinks about what I need. I see this pattern constantly, particularly among anxiously attached individuals. Statements like, how come you never do this, are essentially comparisons in disguise, measuring your current partner against some idealized version of a relationship. I'll gently challenge anyone who finds themselves thinking this way. You absolutely have the right to want that kind of consistent romantic gesture in your life. But if your current partner genuinely isn't capable of providing that right now, it's worth asking yourself honestly why you're staying. That's a completely fair question to sit with. You essentially have two paths. You can decide that what you truly want requires a securely attached partner and pursue that instead, which is a perfectly valid choice. Or you can choose to stay and genuinely accept your partner as they currently are. What doesn't work, though, is staying while continuously trying to pressure or guilt them into becoming someone they're not ready to be. That approach might work briefly, but it won't hold up long term. If you notice yourself frequently making these kinds of comparisons, it's worth recognizing that wanting to stay while also wanting fundamental change from your partner often ends up hurting you far more than it helps. Nobody can force another person to change. People change through feeling accepted, not through pressure or ultimatums. If you're genuinely unhappy and craving a partner who's more emotionally available right now, an avoidant partner likely isn't going to become that person on demand. That's just not typically how it works, at least not without significant healing work on their end first. Choosing a securely attached partner instead is always a valid option. I want you to remember that you have choices here too. You are never obligated to stay in a relationship that consistently leaves you unhappy. Point number 5. Avoidant individuals tend to be genuinely drawn to partners who are comfortable with uncertainty, not necessarily all the time, but in key moments. Let's say you ask your partner whether they'd be open to introducing you to their parents or close friends at some point. Maybe you two aren't quite there yet, and they respond with something like, possibly. That's a genuinely uncertain answer, neither a firm no nor a firm yes, but many people, because they crave certainty, tend to interpret ambiguous responses negatively by default, assuming possibly secretly means no. That's often simply not accurate. Your partner said possibly because that's genuinely where they are, undecided, still processing. I want to share something I've observed repeatedly in my clinical work. When an avoidant person says possibly, more often than not, they are actually sitting with that thought seriously. If the relationship continues moving in a healthy direction without added pressure, and you continue showing acceptance rather than pushing, there's a strong chance your partner will eventually follow through on exactly what they said when they use that word. I know that requires patience, and patience can feel scary when you're emotionally invested. But if you genuinely love this person and feel the relationship is progressing well and worth continuing, there's a solid likelihood you'll eventually get what you're hoping for. Being comfortable with that kind of uncertainty is genuinely attractive to avoidant individuals, and it also tends to stabilize the relationship overall. As you become more at ease with ambiguity, your partner typically feels less suffocated, and ironically, they often start introducing more consistency and reliability into the relationship naturally over time. You end up meeting in the middle, compromising almost without either of you realizing it's happening. Point number 6 centers on active listening, something avoidant individuals value enormously. Active listening shows up in a lot of different forms. I've mentioned in previous videos that once avoidant individuals start feeling genuinely comfortable, truly falling for someone, they often become noticeably more talkative, sometimes even interrupting conversations. This usually isn't intentional rudeness, it's more of a social skills gap. Many avoidant individuals simply haven't had much practice opening up to people throughout their lives, so when they finally do, it can come out a bit clumsily. That's not an excuse to avoid addressing it in conversation, but it's helpful context. Something else that happens, which a lot of people misread, is that avoidant individuals sometimes start voicing their needs more directly as they grow closer to someone, and it doesn't always come out gracefully. It can sound like nitpicking on the surface. This is different from fault-finding behavior, which typically shows up earlier in relationships or during moments when an avoidant person feels emotionally overwhelmed or senses things moving too quickly. Fault-finding doesn't mean they've stopped liking you. It's often actually the opposite, a subconscious attempt to create distance because they like you and it scares them. What I'm describing here, though, is different from fault finding. It's them genuinely communicating a need or desire, just imperfectly. Here's an example to clarify. Suppose an avoidant partner says something like, "Sometimes you get really clingy and I don't know how to respond to it." Underneath the somewhat blunt wording, they're actually saying something important, that they do want to offer you comfort, but sometimes they freeze up or respond slowly, or not at all, when they feel overwhelmed. Not an ideal response pattern, but that's their internal reasoning. And yes, the word clingy isn't the gentlest choice of language. Avoidant individuals often communicate imperfectly, but if you look past the delivery and focus on the underlying message, they're expressing a genuine need and likely an unspoken desire for a different rhythm of communication. There are constructive ways to respond to this. You might say something like, "I didn't realize I was coming across that way. That's something I do struggle with, but I genuinely want to work on it. Thank you for being honest with me. That couldn't have been easy to bring up, and I really appreciate it." This response reinforces the relationship as a team effort. It shows you're not defensive, that you're willing to grow, and that you're on the same side working toward the same goal. A less productive response might sound like, "I only sent that many texts because you never respond. I feel so frustrated, like you don't even care about me." That feeling might be completely valid emotionally, but reacting that way doesn't address the underlying communication mismatch. If a particular communication style genuinely doesn't work for your specific partner, even if it might work beautifully with someone else, you'll need to find an approach that actually functions for the two of you specifically. That's simply part of how relationships operate. As long as there's some overlap and willingness to communicate from both sides, things tend to work out. But insisting there's only one correct way to communicate, your way, makes sustainable connection incredibly difficult because healthy relationships require compromise from both people, communication included. A few broader points worth keeping in mind. It's important to understand where a lot of avoidant behavior actually originates. Avoidant individuals may withdraw from intimacy, communication, connection, even attraction itself, often rooted in early childhood experiences. Frequently, they grew up internalizing the belief that love and emotional distance are somehow linked. As children, when they suppressed or shut down their emotions, their parents, sometimes strict, sometimes overwhelmed, sometimes simply overbearing, tended to respond more warmly when the child wasn't expressing big feelings because it gave the parent more emotional space for themselves. So the parent would become kinder and more affectionate in those moments. What did that unintentionally teach the child? That emotional distance, suppressing your own feelings, is essentially the pathway to receiving love. So, as an avoidant adult falls deeper in love with someone, that old programming can resurface, creating emotional distance, because on some subconscious level, they fear that showing genuine emotion might cost them your love. If you notice this pattern, you're absolutely allowed to feel frustrated by it, but understanding where it originates helps. It's not a calculated choice, it's an unconscious pattern rooted in childhood conditioning. Something else worth mentioning around rekindling attraction more broadly, maintaining trust and communicating openly, particularly during stressful periods in the relationship, is absolutely essential. This doesn't mean constantly repeating yourself or over-explaining. It means consistently being a trustworthy, dependable person. Being someone who communicates clearly without being harsh or overly blunt. Being a genuinely safe presence for your partner. If your partner doesn't feel emotionally safe with you, no strategy or technique is going to work effectively, no matter how well-intentioned it is. That foundation of safety has to exist first. Here's another common misconception I really want to address directly, and I'd encourage you not to fall into this trap. If you're not avoidantly attached yourself, you often end up blaming yourself the moment an avoidant partner pulls away, without realizing that their withdrawal frequently has absolutely nothing to do with you. They might simply be dealing with stress from work, and they'll likely come back around once they've processed it. It's not a reflection of anything you did wrong. I worked with a couple recently where the anxiously attached partner described exactly this scenario. Her partner had shut down and gone quiet for a few days, and she was convinced she'd caused it, wondering what she'd done wrong. It turned out the issue was entirely unrelated, something going on with his mother. This pattern shows up constantly in my practice, not just in this one case. Issues with a parent, stress at work, whatever the trigger might be, it frequently has nothing whatsoever to do with the partner. Avoidant individuals often genuinely struggle to manage multiple emotional demands simultaneously. I'm being honest with you here, it's genuinely difficult for them sometimes. That's not meant as an excuse, just something worth understanding. Often you truly didn't do anything wrong, and if your partner explicitly tells you that you didn't do anything wrong, I'd encourage you to actually believe them. One final point I think is genuinely important. Expressions of love that feel natural and validating to anxiously attached individuals don't always resonate the same way with avoidant individuals, and this creates a lot of confusion in relationships. Compliments are a perfect example. For avoidant individuals, compliments can feel lovely when they're occasional and understated, but if they become constant, they can actually start to feel insincere or even overwhelming. Anxiously attached individuals, on the other hand, tend to genuinely thrive on compliments, and that's a completely healthy way to feel loved. You deserve that kind of affirmation. But avoidant individuals simply don't process compliments the same way. So, if you find yourself showering your partner with constant compliments and consistent availability, and you're left wondering why they don't reciprocate with compliments of their own, or why they seem to have no visible reaction, understand that it's not that they're ignoring you or don't appreciate it. It simply doesn't land for them the way it lands for you. What tends to resonate more with avoidant individuals is when you genuinely respect what they share with you, when you respond thoughtfully to what they express about their feelings, when you show appreciation through attentiveness rather than praise. In return, they're often more capable of offering you reassurance, compliments of their own, and genuine insight into their internal world, giving you the sense of certainty you might be looking for. Ultimately, understanding how each of you naturally communicates and receives love makes an enormous difference in building genuine attraction and lasting connection. I hope this was genuinely helpful for you. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe, like the video, and I'll see you in the next one.